Hip mobility is an extremely important component when it comes to expressing your everyday movement. And if there's a lack of mobility there, that can sometimes present itself in a couple of different ways. So if you really suffer from lower back pain or knee pain, immobile hips may be the culprit. So going over to our best friend Johnny here. So our body takes an alternating approach when it comes to stability and the mobility of our joints. So starting at the feet here, our feet are meant to be stable, okay? Going up a joint, we need to have mobile ankles. Going up a joint, we need to have stable knees. And then we get to our hips, to be nice and mobile. And then our low back finally needs to be nice and stable. Okay, so again, if you're experiencing immobile hips or restriction in the hips, that mobility has to go somewhere. And 9 times out of 10, it's gonna go either the joint above, which is the lower back, or the joint below, which is the knees. So that instability in stable joints could cause a lot of pain. So essentially, by mobilizing the hips, we can alleviate a lot of that pain. If not take it all the way, we can bring some relief into your everyday activities. Okay, so now we're gonna get into our flow. Okay, we're gonna use this to serve as bringing awareness to our body, seeing what's tight, what's not. And we're also going to use it as a way to address those tight tissues and bring new blood and oxygen into those areas. All right, so now before we get into this, big disclaimer. Okay, so we want to make sure that anytime we're working any type of mobility, we want to make sure that our core is nice and neutral and engaged. Okay, so as you're pushing into those stretches and you feel at those end ranges that your back wants to arch or round, we can assume that that mobility, that end range mobility that we need is coming from our spine and not our hips. So keep that core locked in, no cheating. All right, so first couple of exercises in our flow, they're going to be more of a static stretch so that we can really address those neurological tension within those tissues. Okay, so here we have Dalton. He's gonna help me out, go through the flow. We're gonna start him in a 90-90 hip sit hold. So essentially, this is one of my favorite exercises in order to address all areas of the hip. So in the front, he's working his hip external rotator. In the back trail leg, he's getting into that internal rotation musculature, and then he's also working his posterior and his anterior hip. Okay, so he's gonna stand up nice and tall, right? Nice good spine, remember no cheating. We're gonna have active ankles, so he's gonna pull his toes back towards his shin to protect his knee joints, and we're just gonna hold that position. While he's holding, he's thinking about, okay, what feels tight to me? If that front leg is feeling a little tight, he might want to lean forward to get into that glute a little bit more. Okay, we can go on back here. If he feels a little bit more restriction in that back hip, he can turn that hip through and get a little good glute squeeze to get that internal rotation rolling. Or he can just sit and chill out. All right, so that's one of those stretches. Typically, we'd go 30 seconds on each side or to your tolerance. Okay, so next static stretch that we have, we're gonna add a little bit more dynamic portion to it, but still static. It's going to be a half kneeling into your hip mobilization with a band. So he's gonna set up in a half kneeling position. He's gonna put that situation, that band, high in the hip crease here. And he's gonna start off getting his knee, hip, shoulders, everything in line here. Okay, so what that band is doing is pulling the joint or that femur forward to create a little bit more room in that joint. Okay, so what he's gonna do to mobilize it a little bit, he's gonna go ahead and hinge back, dump his pelvis, and then he's gonna really get into that true hip extension with a good glute squeeze. Okay, so we're just working that little movement in the joint. Again, bringing awareness and creating a little bit more space. Typically, we'll go about 5 to 10 reps here, depending on the tension in the musculature. All right, so now we're gonna get into a more dynamic stretches within the flow. And here we have Dalton again. He's gonna sit up nice and tall. We got some wipers to 90-90 transfers. So again, nice tall neutral spine. He's gonna dig his heels and anchor his butt into the ground to provide a good anchor point. Okay, so what he's gonna do, he's going to windshield wiper his knees to one side, trying to keep his sitting bones on the ground. Again, he's feeling for any type of restriction, but just isolating that internal-external rotation right at the hip joint. You see how he kind of wants to hunch down over? That's just his body trying to compensate for him. Make sure that we're sitting tall here, and then we're gonna take what we can get from the wipers. Now he's gonna transfer into a whole transfer here. Go on the other side, yep. So again, he's sitting tall. Good, and then when he's ready, he's going to use his hands and transfer over to the other side. Just kind of feeling what that feels like. Now, he's going to keep remaining tall in his spine, and as he goes to transfer, he's going to resist the urge to hunch over. Go ahead and transfer over. There you go. Just working his body around that hip mobility. One more on the side. And we'll typically go these for time, 30 seconds just to keep a nice flow, or we can go 10 times per side. And then once he's good there, we're going to transition into a quadruped hip rock. So he's going to get into the quadruped position. Again, he's going to get his knees as wide as he can tolerate with his feet as flat as he can. And again, nice neutral spine here. As you can see, he already kind of wants to arch. So we're going to make sure that we're getting his spine nice and neutral here. He's going to push his hips back as far as he can. You see he kind of wants to round here. So again, that would be Dalton's true hip mobility. You don't want to go any further than that because again, that mobility is coming from the spine now. So he'll push back until he can feel his spine and core kind of go, and that's going to be his range of motion. Now he's working his internal, external rotations here. If he wants to work the front side of the hip a little bit, after he pushes back, he's going to tuck his hips under and squeeze on the way back. Good. Again, nice flowy nature. You can do this for time. Make sure you're breathing, or we can go for reps. Typically programmed for about 10 reps on this one. All right, so the last 3 exercises in this flow are meant to stabilize what we mobilize. Okay, we can't use our mobility if we can't stabilize throughout the full range of motion. So we're gonna use a toe touch progression with a towel squeeze in order to realign our joints and create that good body alignment. So what Dalton's gonna do, he's gonna reach up above head, and while he's reaching up above head, he's gonna make sure that his pelvis is neutral and his ribs are pushed down. So nice straight line. He's gonna curl himself down like he's in a phone booth, get a good stretch, lengthen, relax the crown of the head, and then he's gonna push up out of his heels, squeeze his hips, and go right back to that starting position. So we are actually teaching the posterior tilt here, and we're allowing that whole posterior side to lengthen. Now the towel squeeze, what he's doing, he's really crushing in on this towel. It's physically impossible for us to contract our inner thighs and our hamstrings at the same time. So by squeezing in on that pad and contracting our adductors, it's allowing our hamstrings to fully relax and get the stretches they need. Now he's gonna flip around, different stimulus here. His toes or his heels are gonna be up now. Same exercise, just a little different stimulus. Now he's really gonna have to sit back in his hips in order to get that mobility. A little shake there. Good. One more time here, Dalton. Big push out of the heels, good glute squeeze, ribs up, nice and stacked up. Now after we realign the joints here, now we're gonna use it under a loaded position with our dumbbell farmer's marching. So what he's gonna do, the dumbbell is probably a good moderate weight. That's gonna act as a feedback system to keep his core nice and tight. And what he's gonna do, he's just gonna get a good march going. So what this is doing, now that we've created alignment with the toe touch progression, he's actually having to use his mobility now and stabilize without letting that core go. So that position is the top position of a sprint, jump, run, all that good stuff. So now he's using it to apply to his life in this sport. We'll probably do this around 30 seconds each side for some endurance components, or we can go reps 10 each side. Okay, so remember, while you're doing this, our essence of our flow or our purpose of it is to mobilize the joints. Pay attention to those restricted tissues. The next would be to stabilize that mobility. All right, you got to be able to access that mobility and stabilize within that joint. And then lastly, you got to be able to use it. So it's no good to us if we cannot use our mobility. Okay, and remember, while you're going through this, breathe, take your time, and just be aware of whatever feels good, whatever doesn't feel good. Make sure that that core is nice and tight, that you can assure that your mobility is coming from your hips where we want it to be and not your spine.